family goes in this court seeking justice for all of us in America.
America and the rest of the world have been waiting for the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former police officer accused of killing George Floyd. Over the next half hour, we'll bring you testimony from the witnesses who've given evidence during the first week of proceedings. First, though, the trial began with opening statements by the prosecution and the defense, and a warning the evidence contains graphic images and descriptions of the death of George Floyd.
On May 25th of 2020, Mr. Derek Chauvin betrayed this badge when he used excessive and unreasonable force upon the body of Mr. George Floyd. That he put his knees upon his neck and his back, grinding and crushing him until the very breath, no, ladies and gentlemen, until the very life were squeezed out of him. You will learn that he was well aware that Mr. Floyd was unarmed, that Mr. Floyd had not threatened anyone, that Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs, he was completely in the control of the police, he was defenseless. You will learn what happened in that 9 minutes and 29 seconds. The most important numbers you will hear in this trial are 929. What happened in those 9 minutes and 29 seconds when Mr. Derek Chauvin was applying this excessive force to the body of Mr. George Floyd.
You will learn about things such as the authorized use of force, proportionality of force, excited delirium, defensive tactics, including prone handcuffing, neck restraints, maximal restraint technique, the swarm technique. You will learn about rapidly evolving situations and the Minneapolis Police Department's decision-making model. You will learn about crowd control, medical intervention, de-escalation, procedural justice, crisis intervention, and the human factors of force. That is, what happens to a police officer or any person when they are involved in a high-stress use of force situation. And you will learn that Derek Chauvin did exactly what he had been trained to do over the course of his 19-year career. The use of force is not attractive, but it is a necessary component of policing.
Darnella Frazier was 17 when she recorded the video of George Floyd here that went viral, igniting international protest at racism and police abuse. She didn't appear on camera in court, but told the jury she feels regret for not engaging physically with the officers that day, but that ultimately they were the ones at fault.
He had like this cold look, heartless. He didn't care. It seemed as if he didn't care what we were saying. It didn't change anything he was doing.
In response to what the crowd was doing or saying, did you see him at any time kneel in harder on George Floyd in response?
Yes.
Did Mr. Chauvin get off of Mr. Floyd when the ambulance arrived?
No, the ambulance person had to actually tell him to lift up. When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like, it's not what I should have done. It's what he should have done.
The court has played the audio of a 911 call made by witness and mixed martial arts expert Donald Williams. He made that call during George Floyd's arrest here and said he believed he was witnessing a murder.
I did call the police on the police.
Right. And why did you do that?
Because I believe I witnessed a murder.
And so you felt a need to call the police.
And I felt the need to call the police on the police.
Now, there were police there, right?
There were police there.
Okay, why didn't you just talk to them about it?
I believe that they didn't. We just didn't have no connection. You know, I spoke to them, but not on a connection of a human being relationship.
If we can at this point, then play Exhibit 20.
Exhibit 207, May 25, 2020.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
Officer 987 killed a citizen in front of a Chicago store. He just pretty much just killed this guy that wasn't resisting arrest. He had his knee on the dude's neck the whole time, Officer 987. The man went, stopped breathing. He wasn't resisting arrest or nothing. He was already in handcuffs. They pretty much just killed the dude. I don't even know if he's dead for sure, but he was not responsible when the ambulance just came and got him. And the officer that was just out here left, the one that actually just murdered the kid in front of everybody on 38th in Chicago.
Okay. Would you like to speak with the sergeant?
Yeah, like that was bogus what they just did to this man. He was unresponsive. He wasn't resisting arrest or any of it.
Okay, let me get you over to the desk. You can request to speak with the sergeant, okay?
The court heard from an off-duty firefighter who also called 911 that day. Genevieve Hansen said she begged police officers on the scene to let her check to see if George Floyd had a pulse.
I tried different tactics of calm and reasoning. I tried to be assertive. I pled and was desperate.
Did you also at some point start raising your voice?
Yes, sir.
And maybe used some foul language even?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Because I was desperate to help, and I wasn't getting what I needed to do and gaining access.
And at some point, the voices of the other people around you, did you feel that sort of interfered with getting the officer's attention?
Yes.
So as you're doing that, were you able to pay more attention or need more attention to Mr. Floyd and his condition?
I wasn't really able to. I knew he needed help, so at that point it was just getting in there.
Christopher Martin was working as a cashier at Cup Foods, the shop police had been called to after Mr. Floyd was accused of using a fake $20 bill to buy cigarettes.
When I saw the bill, I noticed that it had a blue pigment to it, kind of how a $100 bill will have, and I found that odd, so I assumed that it was fake.
Was it you who called the police about it?
No.
Was it another coworker?
Correct.
And did you ask the coworker to make the call?
No.
And were you present when he made the call?
Correct.
So you were there next to him or something?
Correct.
We saw you standing there with your hands on your head for a while, correct?
Correct.
What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief and guilt.
Okay. Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
Welcome back. This week, Sky News has been bringing continuous coverage and analysis of the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former police officer accused of killing George Floyd here in May last year. We're looking back at some of the testimony of those called to the witness stand during the first week of proceedings. And on day 3, the jury was shown new police body camera footage of George Floyd pleading with officers during his arrest. And a warning, the evidence contains graphic images and descriptions of the death of George Floyd.
Okay, can I talk to you, please? As you get in this car, we can talk.
Also seen in a CCTV video from the same time is 61-year-old Charles McMillian, who appears to have been the first bystander on the scene of Mr. Floyd's arrest.
Jesus Christ, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Thank you. I can't breathe. Stop moving. Mama, Mama. Oh my God. When he kept saying, I can't breathe, and when he said, Mama, you're killing me, and they're killing me, that's what I kept hearing, I can't breathe, Mama, they're killing me. Then when he started saying, my body's shutting down.
And was it your voice somewhere in the middle of all this saying, get up and get in the car? Was that you?
Yes, ma'am.
And why were you saying that? What were you trying to do at that point?
I was trying to help him.
And how did he look to you after this continued, when you said he was saying, Mama, and I can't breathe? How did he appear to be to you?
He appeared to be in and out with the phone running out of his mouth.
Did you remark about his foot on his neck or something to that effect?
I can't recall.
Okay, but if it's there, it would be in the videos?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And again, some of these can be difficult to hear. Can we put up Exhibit 41, please?
Can you advise the fire department if they're still with you, they need to go to 36th Park to assist with the vehicle?
But I feel respect you is.
That's one person's opinion.
But no, I gotta get him. I gotta get him in here.
We gotta control this guy because he's a sizable guy.
Yeah, and I gotta get in the car.
Looks like he's probably on something.
George Floyd's girlfriend, Courtney Ross, was the first person to testify who personally knew Mr. Floyd. She offered a picture of a man whose face, of course, now is known around the world, and described the first time they met.
Floyd has this great, deep Southern voice, raspy. He's like, sis, you okay, sis? And I wasn't okay. I said, no, I'm just waiting for my son's father. He said, well, can I pray with you? I thought I was so tired. We had been through so much, my sons and I. And this kind person just to come up to me and say, can I pray with you? When I felt alone in this lobby, it was so sweet.
At that point, did you know what Mr. Floyd was doing there at the Salvation Army?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. He worked there as a security guard.
Okay. And so he came up to you and tried to comfort you?
Yes. Okay. Floyd and I both suffered with an opioid addiction.
And do you know how, I mean, like for your own self,
yeah,
how you came to be involved, you know, with what kind of drugs and how you became involved?
Use of opioids, yes. Both Floyd and I, our story, it's a classic story of how many people get addicted to opioids. We both suffered from chronic pain. Mine was in my neck and his was in his back. We both had prescriptions, but after prescriptions that were filled and we got addicted and tried really hard to break that addiction many times.
Seth Bravender was one of the paramedics who treated George Floyd. He told the jury that when he arrived on the scene with his partner Derek Smith, Mr. Floyd appeared unresponsive.
I assumed that there was potentially some struggle still because they were still on top of him, so that was my assumption when we pulled up.
So when you got to the scene, having no additional information, seeing what you saw, that's what was going through your mind, is that right?
Yeah, yes.
So when you got to the scene, what did you do next?
Parked the ambulance near the patient and got out. I walked to the back of the ambulance and my partner walked over to check on the patient.
As you approached him to inspect further, were the officers still on top of him?
The officers were still on him when I approached.
And what did you do when you approached?
I was assessing the scene and running through what care may be needed.
And did you take some initial steps, like checking for a pulse?
I checked for a pulse.
And did you also check the individual, Mr. Floyd's, pupils?
I did.
And what did you determine at that point?
They were large, dilated.
So you determined that his pupils were large and dilated. What about a pulse?
I did not palpate a pulse.
When you say palpate, is that you didn't feel or detect a pulse?
I did not detect a pulse.
And what did his condition appear to be to you overall?
In lay terms, I thought he was dead.
Despite being at the center of a closely watched trial, the jurors and the public at large have heard very little from former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. But on Thursday, they heard a call between him and a supervisor reviewing the force he'd used during the arrest.
Hello, 2:30 here. Yeah, I was just going to call you and have you come out to our scene here. Not really, but we just had to hold the guy down. He was going crazy. Wouldn't go in, shutting off for the moment. Wouldn't go in the back of the squad.
Do you recognize the voice in that call?
Yes.
And whose voice was that?
Officer Chauvin.
That was the conversation, or at least his end of the conversation, as you recall it on that day that you just described?
Yes.
He made a reference to shutting off. Can you explain to the jury what that was in reference to?
I probably asked him if he had his camera on or off, since we're having a private conversation.
And that would be within policy, within the body-worn camera policy, for him to shut off during that conversation. Is that right?
Yes.
Did he tell you whether he personally applied any particular type of force or restraint to Mr. Floyd?
I don't believe so.
Did he tell you whether or not he had to, or other officers, pin Mr. Floyd to the ground?
I think in the conversation there he said something about held somebody down.
Did he mention anything about putting his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck or back?
No.
Sir, based on your review of the body-worn camera footage, do you have an opinion as to when the restraint of Mr. Floyd should have ended in this encounter?
Yes.
What is it?
When Mr. Floyd was no longer offering up any resistance to the officers, they could have ended the restraint.
And that was after he was handcuffed and on the ground and no longer resistant?
Correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
The final witness to take the stand was the Minneapolis Police Department's longest-serving officer, Richard Zimmerman.
Based on your review of the body-worn camera videos of the incident?
Yes.
And directing your attention to that moment when Mr. Floyd is placed on the ground?
Yes.
What is your, your view of that use of force during that time period?
Totally unnecessary.
What do you mean?
Well, first of all, pulling him down to the ground, face down, and putting your knee on the neck for that amount of time is just uncalled for. I saw no reason why the officers felt they were in danger, if that's what they felt. And that's what they would have to feel to be able to use that kind of force.
Good question.
So, in your opinion, should that restraint have stopped once he was handcuffed and prone on the ground?
Absolutely.
The first 5 days of this trial have been about much more than just those 9 minutes and 29 seconds, footage not seen publicly before, as added to the picture of what happened before and after George Floyd died. For the jury, it is about what happened and why. But for millions of others, it's about a search for answers. The trial will resume on Monday.